WPHL17 presents In Focus, a look at the issues affecting the Philadelphia region. Now your host, Steve Highsmith.
Pennsylvania has been witness to the successes and failures of charter schools since the Commonwealth authorized the alternatives to traditional public school education in the late 1990s. How well do charter executives believe the movement has grown? What impact is it having, and how will it affect the future of education? Good morning, I'm Steve Highsmith, and welcome to In Focus. Charter schools are public schools. They are self-managed. They do receive taxpayers' money. The brick and mortar schools must be approved by the local school district. They differ from traditional public schools, however, in that they are free of some of the mandates of public education. There are more than 170 charter schools in Pennsylvania. More than half are in southeastern Pennsylvania, and most of them are in Philadelphia. About 16 are cyber charter schools in the Commonwealth. The rest are brick and mortar schools, meaning they use buildings and classrooms. There are more than 105,000 Pennsylvania students in charter schools, about 54,000 in Philadelphia. That's about 1 in 4 Philadelphia public school students. About 44,000 Pennsylvania children are on waiting lists to get into charter schools if the space or more schools were to be made available. With me now are Dr. Naomi Booker, Chief Executive Officer of Global Leadership Academy Charter School and President of the Philadelphia Charters for Excellence Coalition, representing about 30 charter schools, and Stacey Cruise, Chief Executive Officer of American Paradigm Schools, which operates 3 charter schools on 5 campuses in Philadelphia. Thank you both for being here. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Dr. Booker, may I call you Naomi?
Yes.
Let's begin with just what charter schools are all about. What distinguishes charter schools from the traditional public school?
Well, one of the things is that when you have a charter school, there's a theme that's and a mission and a vision that parents can select a place for their child. So parents are looking for somewhere that's going to address their needs. A charter school is a safe environment, and parents are looking for safe environments. And so they can go to these places. They don't have to pay a lot of money. They are free for them to go to because it's a public school. And so people who don't have the means to go to a private school or move out of the city do have the choice of a charter school. And so they are able to put their names on a list, and then they're selected from a lottery, and they can join the school if they're selected.
Stacey, do you see any other positive aspects of charter schools that maybe charter schools have in common?
Yes. One of the things that's really interesting as charter schools have, the number of charter schools have grown in Philadelphia. You see where a charter school can help stabilize a neighborhood, where charter schools are becoming neighborhood schools as opposed to schools that select children from the entire city. I would like to see us be able to move to even further, where a neighborhood of young professionals, those people will stay in the city because there is a charter school in their neighborhood where they could send their children to. So I see charter schools as offering choice to not only to families that have a difficult time affording a private school education because their neighborhood school is not up to par, but also meeting the needs of the young family so that they can stay in the city of Philadelphia and not move out when their child becomes of age.
Now, you're with American Paradigm Schools.
Yeah.
Now, you operate multiple schools on 3 campuses. Is that correct? 5 schools on 3 campuses. What is American Paradigm all about? So
American Paradigm grew out of it was really surprising how it grew. It grew when we didn't even know it was growing. When Jerry Santilli and I started First Philadelphia about 11 years ago, we quickly noticed that there were systems that we had in place and practices that we had in place that allowed more children to really be successful and become attached to schools in a way that allowed them to make school a priority and for families to make school as a priority. So we started looking at those practices that we had, and we were able to grow and replicate those practices in another school. Tacony Academy became our replication. But what's key to American Paradigm is to replicate the practices that we have identified as good instruction, as good community builders, things of that nature, but allow a charter school to also have its own life, its own mission, its own vision, based around the practices that we have developed in our flagship school.
Well, a couple of quick questions if I can. I mean, I noticed that a lot of the kids, or all the kids, but I haven't been in every charter school in the city, wear uniforms. Is that typical of a charter school, that there is a dress code?
For our charter schools, yes. We find that when our children are dressed in a professional way, that it helps maintain their behavior and gives them a sense of pride, and that it really signals you're in school, it's time to go to work.
And what about the school day? Is your school day the same length as the traditional public school that might be in the same neighborhood?
Our school day and school year is longer. First Philadelphia opens early August, August 8th. Our schools have intercessions that we started years ago, and those intercessions break up the school year so that it doesn't seem like the children are in school for a longer period of time.
You're with Global Leadership Academy, Naomi.
Absolutely.
And you represent a lot of other schools, but the uniform part of that, is that also something that is typical?
Yes, we wear uniforms, we wear shirts and ties. It is a business for them, just like we come to work and go and do what we need to do.
And your school days longer?
Our school days, we have a year-round calendar. We start in August, we end in June. We go to school from 8 in the morning until 4 in the evening.
Are the individual class hours longer, or do you have more types of classes? In other words, if you have history you're teaching, instead of teaching for 45 or 50 minutes, are you teaching for an hour and 10? I mean, how does that work?
Well, in the most part, they are teaching, depends on the class. So it's 90 minutes for reading. It might be an hour for social studies, which we call global studies, because it is a global school. This is a school preparing future children to be leaders of the world. And so to do that, we spend from kindergarten through 8th grade giving them the opportunities to explore the global society.
Well, now let me ask you about that, because you have a specific mission there, but some parents might be saying, I want my child to go to a charter school, and they pick one, say, that may be closest to where they're living, and they may not be thinking about this leadership of the world thing, they're just thinking charter school. Do you ever run into that?
Well, first of all, we have open houses. We also have meetings with parents before the lottery time so that we can just explain to them the mission and vision of our school. Because by the time you're in 7th grade, our children are traveling internationally, and they have to get a passport by that time. So we need parents to understand that as part of the curriculum, they are going to travel outside of the United States. And so they need to understand that from kindergarten through 8th grade, there's travel involved. And
how often do they travel?
Well, they travel at least a major travel once a year to go outside of the city. But it's an expeditionary school, so they travel a lot. They learn in the classroom, and then they go see what it is that they're doing. So, for example,
you need any chaperones?
Our 6th graders study the civil rights movement, and then they go to Atlanta and Memphis. They go to see where Dr. King was born, and they see where he died. And they travel to different colleges, and they go to colleges there as well. 7th graders, they study the Underground Railroad. They travel to Canada. And
those experiences are mind-blowing, aren't they?
Mind-blowing.
Sitting in Ebenezer Baptist Church.
Absolutely.
Just opens your mind up.
Absolutely.
It sends light bulbs off that somehow, well, it can be done not being there, but it's harder.
It's very different. Last year, one of our 6th graders sat in the seat that Coretta Scott King sat in. She sat there and cried. And then she asked for a picture to be taken because it was something that she always wanted. You can't give that to a child sitting in a classroom in a book, but you can do it by you picking them up and taking them to it. Same thing when we go to Canada. Same thing when they go to the Bahamas and they're walking around in Nassau and Freeport and talking to folks who have downlines of slavery. These are people that,
All right, this sounds expensive, though. So let's talk. I want to talk about the money. It's free because it's public education.
Yes.
Let's talk about that in a moment. But you mentioned lottery first, and Stacey. So, how are the students selected? Do you get to pick and choose?
Oh no, not at all. I think it's so important for everyone to remember that charter schools are foremost a public school. So no, we do not select our students. For American Paradigm schools, some of our schools have a catchment area, and there's a select neighborhood of children that we must pull from. But families have the opportunity to fill out an application, and we have a public lottery, public. Over 100 people come and watch the lottery so that they can see if their student was selected or if they're on the wait list.
That must be, I imagine, a very difficult moment.
It's the worst day of the year. It is absolutely the worst day of the year.
Absolutely.
For our kindergarten, we need basically 75 children, and we may have 800 families that have applied. And we have families that have applied over and over again. And the easiest entry point for a charter school, if it's a K-8 program, is to come in kindergarten. If it's a high school program, in 9th grade, because that's when you need the largest number of children. And families typically stay. Our retention rate is extremely high, over 90%. So as the grades, in the upper grades, there may be 2 or 3 openings based on a family moving out of the city. But it is a very difficult day.
And when you're sitting there with this canister or computer and you're picking these names, and I have 400 and 500 people in the audience, 75 seats for available spots in kindergarten, maybe 3 or 4 in every grade. And right now is our open enrollment, because from January to March, our lottery day is March the 12th. So from this time, every Wednesday, people are coming in and filling out the application or going online. And you see these people, and they're talking to you, and they want to come in your school, and in your mind the chances are so slim, and it's because we're locked in at a number. We are locked in at 675 children that the school district will pay us for, and it's
per school or per
depends on your school. We're at 675.
You're at 675.
So that's our cap. Other schools have different numbers. But I have 3 available classrooms. I could take more, in our new school.
Well, where does this come from? Let's understand the limit here. Is it because there aren't enough charter schools? Is it because there aren't enough classrooms? Or is it because the state law says only X percentage of students can be in charter schools?
There is no cap. And so there's not supposed to be a cap that says that, you can take only a certain amount. But you apply for a charter, and when you apply for a charter, you put in a number. And so when you put that number in, then the district who approves the charter locks you in at that number. The state says it's not legal for them to lock you in at that number, but the district locks you in at that number. And the district is using it based on their numbers.
We'll continue this discussion, talk more about money and the effect of charter schools in a moment, more on how charter schools work and their effect on education ahead on In Focus. Stay tuned. Back on In Focus, I'm Steve Highsmith. This morning we're having a discussion with 2 charter school executives about how charter schools are performing and their impact on public education from their perspective. With me are Dr. Naomi Booker, Chief Executive Officer of Global Leadership Academy Charter School and President of the Philadelphia Charters for Excellence Coalition, representing about 30 charter schools. And on the left, Stacey Cruise, Chief Executive Officer of American Paradigm Schools, which operates 3 charter schools on 5 campuses in Philadelphia. So let's continue our discussion about money in this. So charter schools are public schools, and they just differ from traditional public schools in a few ways. In terms of the money that's allotted for each, do you get the same amount of money, less money than the neighborhood traditional school gets?
Absolutely not. The money comes from the state. It goes to the School District of Philadelphia, and we get 75% of it. So essentially, we have to do what we do with less money.
Now, why do you get 75% of it? Who makes that decision? Is it the district or the state funding formula?
The district, because they take 25% to...
for administrative costs.
The district does have to manage. You are managed by the district. So there is some administrative cost. I take it that you might suggest it's not 25%.
Not 25%.
What percent do you think it might be?
5%.
5%? All right.
Well, and the thing about it is that with that piece is, yes, they're supposed to monitor the schools. Now, let's understand that in 1997 there was 1 charter school that opened, maybe 2, and that now there are 80 plus. So in that time frame of monitoring, the district should have monitored all of those. They opened up all of these. They allowed for them to come in. And so there's a question to be of concern about that monitoring, because now, as we get to this point where we have a lot of negative about negatives about what's happening in charters. Well, who was monitoring them? So there's where our 25% should have come in, because if there were charters that were being mismanaged or failing or not doing what they were supposed to be doing for children, yes, they should have been closed, just as Philadelphia schools should have been closed.
Stacey, not all charters achieve the adequate yearly progress, the AYP.
Correct.
And how do you explain that? In other words, how should people look at it? Should they look at it as an indictment of charter schools, or what?
Many charter schools, when they start off, they're taking children strictly from the district that have had 2, 3, 4 years of education behind them. And many of those children come to us, and we've had that experience with holes in their education, and those gaps have to be filled, and filling those gaps allow for achievement so that children can perform better on the PSSAs and the state testing. When a student comes in as a kindergarten student, and by the time they're ready to take the PSSA in 3rd grade, there should be no gap. But most charter schools accept new students when they're opening that have already had a school experience, and closing that gap to make up that time really does take time.
You think it explains a lot of that failure to make AYP
Yes.
by several
It really
dozen?
does, because we're locked in on a test score for an AYP. But if last year we took 175 new students in grades K to 8. So those children that came into us that were, say, in the 7th grade, they may have been 3 or 4 or 5 years behind reading levels. They're not going to do really great on an on a PSSA test that year. They may not do it the next year, but the gap is closing, and that's
yes.
what we're not given credit for.
That's not being measured at
And
all.
that if a child goes through a public education program, school district, and they are behind by 6th grade, by 12th grade, they're in a 6th grade reading level, which means they have lost 6 years. But in a charter school, if given time and if people would actually collect that data, they would see that we close that gap a lot faster.
If you were to look at a percentage of all the schools that are in the state and go back to the late 90s, there are some failures in the charter school movement.
Exactly.
But would you say that by far there are more successes?
Oh,
Absolutely.
absolutely.
And when you compare that to the success failure rate in the traditional public school in the District of Philadelphia, for example, would you say that that success rate is higher than the success rate of public schools, traditional public schools in Philadelphia?
Yes, I would, because charter schools have been in business for, 10, 15 years. Public schools have been in business almost 100 years. So there has been a decline over time. And this last decade has really been a decline in public schools in Philadelphia.
How do you work with 75% of the funding? Because you still have to have a facility, correct?
Yes.
And now, do you pay your teachers less as a rule, Stacey?
Yes, unfortunately we have to, because of having less money to work with as our operating funds.
Right.
And
Does that make it difficult to keep teachers?
it has. There have been times that we have lost a teacher or two because we cannot compete with a suburban district or with the District of Philadelphia. But typically, the type of teacher that will come to a charter school is the type of teacher that wants to teach. And of course, everyone deserves a good wage, and of course, teachers are professionals and should be compensated as such. But a lot of times when you look at the quality of life as an educator and being able to practice your craft in an environment that welcomes that dedication, a lot of times teachers will make the choice.
Does this apply to principals as well? Naomi,
Yes.
you're a former principal in the school district. Do you think that kind of dedication generally that comes to a charter school in a teacher also manifests itself in a principal?
Absolutely, because in a charter school, the principal or the CEO, because in our school, I'm the CEO, I have a principal, Mrs. Evans, who manages the school at that level as well. But there's a lot of independence. So when I worked in the district, there were a lot of things that I wanted to do that I was not able to do as a principal because I was in this big, group. And so, I had to fit into things that the district would allow. For example, I told you about our travels. I could not do that in the school district. It was very difficult to even try to take children outside of the city.
Do you fundraise? Do you have people?
We have
do you found
fundraised like crazy.
Okay, so
Our schools also travel. We start traveling in 6th grade and expect children to have a passport by the time they finish. First Philadelphia and Tacony Academy. And our newest school, Memphis Street Academy, which is a Renaissance school. We have children that will be going to Montreal.
Explain what Renaissance School is.
So Renaissance School is it's an initiative that the school district of Philadelphia supports, and it's a way to help reform a school that has been chronically low performing for quite a while.
But I believe the evidence is in that where that extra emphasis, attention, and money is put into the Renaissance effort, the results have been paying off the last couple of years. Yes,
so this is our very first year having a Renaissance school. So we have Memphis Street Academy. Formerly it was John Paul Jones Middle School. And it was a school that was considered a troubled school. Lots of police interaction during the day and after school and at dismissal time. We had children who really did not find the value of education. So American Paradigm restarted the school in September and put some of those key practices that I spoke of earlier in place, but gave the school its own identity. That school is a STEAM school, so it's science, technology, engineering, arts and math, and it's working.
Well, more on the future of charter schools. What do they want to see happen in a moment on PHL 17. Stay tuned. And In Focus continues on PHL 17 with Dr. Naomi Booker, Chief Executive Officer of Global Leadership Academy Charter School, and Stacey Cruise, Chief Executive Officer of Paradigm Schools. Thank you both for being here again. So, when we look at the future of charter schools, we've seen a significant growth. Are we in a period of reassessment, slowing down, or should we speed up?
Well, I mean, I think that we should speed up, but that's, because it's about children, and we need to make schools work. We need to make the schools work in the school district, and if charters are that reform issue that is helping it, then let's do that. We've got independent charters. We need to open the doors and let people who have a history or replicate. We're trying to get a high school. So we have asked the district over a year ago to, we put in an application for a high school. There are now Renaissance schools, which is another reform model. If we're trying to do what's best for children, then we need to grab these opportunities and do it now.
But there are parents who say, for example, and some other public education advocates who believe that, intentionally or not, the charter school movement has harmed the traditional public school because invested, active parents are lobbying for the charters. Those kids wind up in the charters, and this is the simplest reason. And therefore, it makes more problematic what is going on in the traditional school, or that because the number of students in a traditional school building is less, that it makes it more difficult and expensive for that district. So that there are these bad things that are happening to the traditional public schools because of the success of charter schools that are unintended.
And of course, and again, as we begin to look at our organization and our facilities plan, then had we done this 10 years ago, then maybe they wouldn't be closing down 37 schools now. So you have to look at your organization and its budget as you're moving along. Again, let's understand parents. Parents want what's best for their children. And also parents want to be heard. And in our charter schools at GLA, parents come to our board meetings. I have a board president, Mr. Lorenzo Huff. I have a trustee board. We have a meeting once a month. We are a district. We are just not a school. We're a district.
What is your hope, Stacey, for the charter school movement, and not just American Paradigm?
My hope is that the charter school movement allows children and families to have the choices that they need. Not just families who live in a community that does not have a good local school, but for the young family that wants to stay in the city. I would like for the charter school movement to offer the choice that families need, not based on income or neighborhood, and that students will be successful. And my biggest hope that I love to talk about is that some of them will come back as teachers.
Absolutely.
And work in the charter schools so that the movement can continue. You know, parents will not remove their student from a school if they're flourishing.
Right.
If the child is doing well, they're not going to remove their child from that environment. So we need to have more places where parents feel that their child is getting the very best education that can be offered to them. And for teachers to be able to teach and feel respected and to be treated as professionals, and for school leaders to really be able to lead and lead a school that really meets the needs of a given community.
You optimistic about the future?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yes.
I really am. I think that, you know, we're at a point where the optimism is great. I know we're at a place where, because here's the other thing, as long as we do well, we're going to have negative press.
That sounds like the beginning of a whole other discussion. We will continue that at a future date. And that's In Focus for this week. Thank you both. Thank you for watching. I'm Steve Highsmith. Enjoy your weekend and have a great weekend.